the diagnostic traits of narcissism is that they lack empathy. They are unwilling to recognize or identify it with the feelings and needs of others.
One of the biggest words in here is unwilling to recognize and identify with the feelings of others, because they have the capacity. They will exploit their ability to empathize with people, to know what people are feeling, and to know what people are experiencing. So they're unwilling to care about other people's feelings.
So it's really only about recognizing it so they can leverage it, again, for their own means.
Correct.
To me, like, in my perception of empathy, because I have empathy and I use it on a regular basis, that's what prevents me from manipulating people or doing hurtful things to other human beings. Because I know what that would be or what that would feel like. And that's why I don't do it. So I think that's sort of also, if you're unwilling to have empathy, that's what allows you to carry on and use all those other tools that narcissists do.
Mm-hmm. And you're touching on the golden rule there, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Confucius, even pre-existing that teaching, said, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. I sense what they do is they project themselves into that experience rather than you really understand what that person's experience is.
Yeah, because there's a difference. There's a difference between how I would experience a situation and versus how you would experience a situation. And true empathy is me understanding how you would experience a situation.
Yes, yeah. I love how you say that. And the metaphor that I like to use with that is based on that saying, you don't know the experience of somebody else until you've walked a mile in their shoes. I actually don't agree with the way that that's stated. If you walk a mile in their shoes, you know what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes. What's it like for them to walk a mile in their shoes? Right. So like you're saying, to truly understand their experience of that, rather than just projecting ourselves into what we think that experience would be. So true empathy is somebody jumping in and really understanding what your experience is.
Yeah. They will appear to be empathetic.
Welcome to the Neonarcissism podcast, hosted by emotional intelligence specialists Kim and Jackie of Element Q, alongside strategic psychotherapist Brad Kaufman.
Hello, welcome back to the Neonarcissism podcast. We are talking empathy today in relation to narcissism. One of the traits, the diagnostic traits of narcissism is that they lack empathy. I think everybody's heard this before as well, or most people. And so what that really means is they are unwilling to recognize or identify it with the feelings and needs of others. Empathy, this is a big one.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the biggest words in here is unwilling to recognize and identify with the feelings of others, because they have the capacity to recognize those things. But again, as we talked about previously from the other criteria, they will exploit their ability to empathize with people, to know what people are feeling, and to know what people are experiencing. So they're unwilling to care about other people's feelings.
So it's really only about recognizing it so they can leverage it, again, for their own means.
Correct. So to say that they actually lack empathy, this is where I will actually argue against the DSM to some degree. Now, it depends on how you define empathy. Like true empathy is deep care for somebody's feelings and that type of thing. But at the same time, in our North American culture, we can look at empathy as just being the understanding of somebody else's or recognition of somebody else's experience. But they are unwilling to, I would say, not just recognize, but care.
I was thinking on this empathy thing because I have witnessed people, narcissists, say that they don't really feel the need for empathy, or they don't really understand why empathy is a thing. Like, why? I mean, we've even had that question in one of our classes, like, well, like, why do we have to be why is empathy important? Like they do. So I do think like they recognize what it is, but yeah, it's the execution of it in a real way that's lacking. Right?
Well, because to me, like in my perception of empathy, because I have empathy and I use it on a regular basis, that's what prevents me from manipulating people or doing hurtful things to other human beings. Because I know what that would be or what that would feel like. And that's why I don't do it. So I think that's sort of also, if you're unwilling to have empathy, that's what allows you to carry on and use all those other tools that narcissists do.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you're touching on the golden rule there, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Confucius, even pre-existing that teaching, said, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. And like you're saying, when you know that a certain action or behavior is hurtful, or if it was done to you, this is the ability to actually put yourself in the place of somebody else or anticipate what their experience might be.
Yeah.
And unlike the narcissist, if you know what their sensitivities are, if you know what their traumas are, you're going to be very careful around that based on your empathy. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like we talked about before, with their knowledge of that, they will actually utilize that against a person and exploit that.
Yeah, it becomes a weapon. And how devastatingly hurtful is that, right? Mm-hmm. When you share part of your deepest parts of yourself, and then that's weaponized against you, that cuts deep.
But what I was going to say is you have to be careful, because they might use what is perceived as empathy initially with you to get all that information from you.
Absolutely.
And be the most amazing person to you in the world. And you think it's this amazing relationship while they're soaking up all that information. And then the moment you do something that goes against their rules or expectations, fantasies, or whatever, it's done. Mm-hmm. Empathy turned off, dagger in the heart.
Exactly.
Dagger in the heart. Yeah.
Exactly. So and that's where the discussion lies. Is it true empathy if they don't use it through a lens of care? Mm-hmm. So even though they can recognize and understand and everything like that, can they truly empathize with where somebody's at? Now, I have seen it in rare occasions where they will. It's almost like you'll see them, but I sense what they do is they project themselves into that experience rather than you really understand what that person's experience is.
Yeah, because there's a difference. There's a difference between how I would experience a situation and versus how you would experience a situation. And true empathy is me understanding how you would experience a situation.
Yes. Yeah. I love how you say that. And the metaphor that I like to use with that is based on that saying, you don't know the experience of somebody else until you walked a mile in their shoes. I actually don't agree with the way that that's stated. If you walk a mile in their shoes, you know what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes. What's it like for them to walk a mile in their shoes? Right. So like you're saying, to truly understand their experience of that, rather than just projecting ourselves into what we think that experience would be. So true empathy is somebody jumping in and really understanding what your experience is.
Yeah.
So
they can use that even as a tactic to look like the hero, to look like, to move towards maybe love bombing, right? They will appear to be empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also thinking we should clarify the difference between sympathy and empathy, because a lot of people also don't know the difference. So they might think they're appearing empathetic, but they're actually being sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Do you want to break down that difference?
Sure.
Go ahead, Brad.
Sure. Well, to me, it's kind of an arbitrary distinction, and I've heard people define it in different ways. But sympathy is just this understanding of, in a way, it kind of ties into that projection space, where if I project myself into that person's experience, I can be sympathetic with what their experience is. But again, to be truly empathetic, that's where I have to know what their experience is within that space.
Yeah. I think an example someone mentioned to me once that I always think about is, so you go to a funeral. It's not a funeral for somebody you know, but it's a funeral for a friend of yours who lost someone really close to them. And you're at the funeral and you're watching all those people bawling their eyes out who weren't really connected to that human that died, but they're making it all about them in that moment, versus am I attending that funeral and I'm having empathy for how my friend is feeling because of the loss that they've had in their life, and I can feel how that would feel for them, not about how this relates to me.
Now, this is a healthy person discussion.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
is what this is, because a narcissist isn't even going to care what the difference between sympathy and empathy actually is.
No.
So this is why it's so important to talk about what empathy truly is. And this is why I kind of disagree with the way that the DSM says it. I mean, I'm getting into semantics at that point, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Like they can collect all of this information. They can understand when they want to, but they're unwilling to care.
It hurts my head to think of that, though. Like, just like that you could, again, from a healthy person's perspective, that you could see somebody in that much pain and just like be able to maneuver yourself in such a way to be unwilling to care. Like that, it's painful to think about.
Now, yeah, it is, right? Because again, from a healthy person's perspective. Now, this kind of reveals the true experience of being a narcissist, though. A narcissist, relatively speaking, is always in pain. The reason that they need to use delusion or fantasy is to escape that pain. The reason that they need to get supply is so it's this whole escapism type thing. You know, so if somebody else is in pain, that doesn't help them escape. Unless they can point at, oh, look at you, you're such a failure, and make you look terrible for being in that pain and exploit that pain to some degree. But if for some reason they're getting pulled into the experience of your pain, they will push against that as much as they possibly can. And if their pain starts to emerge and you want to jump in to sit with them in the pain, now they'll actually get competitive when it comes to pain. Oh, you think your pain's better?
Oh, yeah. No, I've definitely seen this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, multiply that by 1,000,000, and that's my pain. Oh, wow, that sounds terrible. Tell me more. Right? But then as soon as you go to dive in and do this true empathy thing, now they're running away. They're pointing a finger at you. Now they're doing something in that sense. And the strange part is, in my experience, I've gotten the strong sense that they want their pain to be seen. But for their pain to be seen, it brings it to the surface, and then what the heck are they supposed to do with it? Because remember, their strategy is to constantly avoid or escape it. They have no strategy on how to actually deal with it. They just have all of these coping mechanisms. So for you to meet them in their pain would be a very healthy, empathetic thing to do, and it could actually be very healing for them if they could actually receive it.
Interesting. But it's those sort, like the image I'm just getting is that it might come to the surface and there could be that glimmer of it where you can see it, and it's just like, just as you're trying to get it, it's like gone. Yes.
Vaporizes.
It vaporizes, yeah.
Yeah. And they'll use various techniques to make it vaporize, to get it back to that unrecognized or unknown space.
I think the thing I'm just processing over here is the empathetic person who is in the relationship with the narcissist and their pain. I think this is where it can get murky, and the empathetic person in the relationship can feel a little justified in staying because they see the pain and they can truly feel the pain that the narcissist is in. And if you are in a personal relationship with that person and there is love there, then witnessing that or knowing that that pain's there and wanting so much to love the person through this and support them through this is painful as well. Another painful moment when they will not, cannot, choose not to trust in the safety of that relationship, because it could actually really meet the true self of who they are. And that just sounds devastating, I would think, to a narcissist. Like, how terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? But to the empath on the other side, that is deeply what they are looking to connect to.
Yeah, and
which is why it can feel so devastating.
Yeah. And as empaths, that's what you're drawn to do. You're drawn to help and to want to, help heal and help that person feel like they are seen.
Yeah.
For once. But again, that's a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
And for them to be in.
And really, they use all of these traits to avoid being seen for truly who they are.
Yeah.
So that's just like a really big one right there. That just can get to that core that they just will not let you in. Mm-hmm. Or maybe on the rare moment, you might see a glimmer of it.
Yes.
Like you spoke of.
Yeah. Yeah. And
retreats.
And ironically, what they can actually do is they can actually take their experience and make it a grandiose experience. And so then the idea of making it so pronounced, again, they aren't doing that to deal with it. They're doing that to be like, look at me. Again, they're somehow different, or they're somehow higher. They're more of a victim in this way. They don't want to resolve it. They're exploiting their own emotions at that point, their own trauma at that point. No wonder they're so good at doing it to other people, because essentially they do it to themselves. And in my experience, I would always say one person's pain does not negate the others.
No, it doesn't.
Right? One person's struggle does not negate the others. It's yes and. It's not either or.
You win. Your pain's bigger.
Right, right. And the example I like to use is like, okay, so somebody's left thumb gets cut off and somebody's right thumb gets cut off. And like, do you sit there and say, oh no, my pain's worse because my right thumb got cut off?
Well, I'm right-handed, so if I lost my right thumb, that would be a lot more traumatic than you losing a left thumb.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that would be their reasoning, right?
Well,
good role-playing area.
It would be, but that is how insane it actually gets.
Yeah.
Like, what are you crying about?
Yeah.
I lost my right thumb, not my left. Right? It's like... It's just absurd. But anyway.
It's a good example.
Again, this is where we can become empathetic of them and the pain that they actually experience, because it really is tragic what it does to them and what it does to the people around them when they experience this type of thing.
I think that's great, actually, that because it is tragic, right?
Yeah.
Labeling it that,
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, well, okay.
I think that pretty much covers that, unless we have some final thoughts on what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, as we always say, you don't know how to deal with something until you know what you're dealing with. We'll see you next time.